The Senator from North Carolina.
Thank you, Madam President. I think the distinguished senator from North Dakota on his comments, I'd like to be associated with all of them. In fact, particularly recognizing many of our farmers in our state. The senator from North Dakota and I have had discussions about the friendly competition in terms of agriculture states and the hard work that they're doing to feed America and the world. But today, Madam President, I rise to express my support for Chairman Roberts' bill for the biotechnology labeling legislation. I'm supportive of Chairman Roberts' effort because it addresses a real problem. The problem is that a small portion of the food industry is trying to impose their policy preferences onto the entire food supply chain in the United States. We are where we are because the Vermont law is not written in a way that merely impacts the citizens of Vermont. It's astonishing to hear the misleading claim that Vermont law is about the right to know. If the Vermont law was about the right to know, why is it that the law exempts so many products? Here are some examples of the absurdity about the Vermont law. Vegetable cheese lasagna would be labeled, but meat lasagna wouldn't. Soy milk would need to be labeled, but a cow's milk would not. Frozen pizza would need to be labeled, but delivered pizza would not. Vegetable soup would need to be labeled, but vegetable beef soup would not. Food at a restaurant would be totally exempt, but not food at a grocery store. Vegetarian chili would need to be labeled, but meat chili would not. Veggie burgers made with soy would need to be labeled, but cheeseburgers wouldn't. It's a patchwork that, in my way of thinking, doesn't make sense if you're really trying to come up with a consistent way to communicate to consumers what's in the food they're eating. The Vermont law is a classic case of government picking winners and losers and putting the burden of the decisions on the back of hardworking Americans. I had this slide up to begin with, but I think this is something that we have to continue to be focused on. It's estimated that the added cost of compliance, if you were to take the Vermont law and have a couple of dozen other states create their own variants and have all the complexity added, that will result in a cost of some $1,000 additional per household. In this economy, how many families can afford another $1,000 a year for food? And I'm surprised that number is not higher. Manufacturers, and it most likely will be, and here's why. Manufacturers are subject to a $1,000 fine if one of their products is mistakenly or inadvertently found for sale in Vermont on a store shelf. The food industry will have over 100,000 items in the state of Vermont, a state that has some 600,000 residents. If only 5 to 10% of those products are even unintentionally mislabeled, that means fines of as much as $10 million per day. In addition to the millions per year companies will have to pay to actually change their supply chains to comply with the law to serve a population of 625,000. We are often told in this chamber that we need to be more cognizant of the science. Those who are irresponsibly scaring the American people with hopes of Vermont mandatory labeling need to really understand that the science is against them. Late last year, the FDA rejected a petition calling for mandatory labeling of foods from genetically engineered crops, stating, "The simple fact that a plant is produced by one method over another does not necessarily mean that there will be a difference in the safety or other characteristics of the resulting foods." It goes on to say, "To date, we have completed over 155 consultations for biotech plant varieties. The numbers of consultations completed, coupled with the rigor of the evaluations, demonstrate that foods from biotech plants can be as safe as comparable foods produced using conventional plant breeding." During a Senate Appropriations Subcommittee hearing last week, the USDA Secretary, Mr. Vilsack, responded to questions regarding GMOs by emphasizing that mandatory labeling efforts are not about food safety, nutritional benefits, or the science. 2 weeks ago, the Secretary was quoted at a conference referring to genetically modified products, and he said this, "I am here to unequivocally say that they are safe to consumers." Chairman Roberts' language does exactly what Congress should be doing with regards to marketing standards, and that is setting rules of engagement that are consistent, balanced, and fair for all players in the industry by providing consistent information to consumers about the content of their food. With the chairman's bill, the marketplace is an opportunity to find the best approaches to getting consumers the information they want without imposing new regulations that add cost to our food supply, complexity, and no more real information or clarity. If we as a nation are going to have a discussion on the necessity of labeling technology products, fine. But the Vermont law is not the catalyst for the debate, and that conversation should be with the American people, not one state with fewer than 650,000 people dictating to the market of more than 317 million people. So, Madam President, I encourage my colleagues to recognize that we should do everything that we can to inform consumers about the content of their food. There's a right way to do it, and there's a wrong way to do it. There's a more costly way to do it, as has been proposed by the Vermont law, or there's a more straightforward, effective, and consistent way, and that's what Chairman Roberts is trying to accomplish with this bill. I encourage everyone to support it. Thank you, Madam President, and I note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the